Hi everyone. Today we're going to do sort of a webinar on App 360, our new platform or new part of our platform, and kind of talk about what's new within the platform. Today I have with me is Sean Pitts, and my name is Spencer.
How's it going, everyone? My name is Sean Pitts. I am a customer success engineer here at Logz.io. I've been with the Logz.io family for about 2+ years now, coming up on 3. I was a member of the support team prior, so just moved over into the customer success role about 6 months ago. I love technology, I love people, and I actually own 7 dogs, so I'm running a mini farm here. Spencer, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I have only one dog, and she's enough for me, so I couldn't imagine 7 of them. But my name is Spencer. I'm one of the sales engineers over here within Logz.io. Like Sean, I've been here for about 3 years actually. And yeah, I'm married and I have one son, and he's a handful too. So we have a fun little time in our small place in Boston. But yeah, if we want to get into the demo. So yeah, brief agenda about today. Yeah, basically wanted to talk a little bit about kind of give an overview of what we're doing with App 360, part of our new part of our platform. Some of the features around that. I think we also want to get into a little bit about what our traditional APMs are, and then we can talk a little bit about like how we sort of help out with these particular like problems that happen with current APMs, and then we'll get into a product demonstration and then a Q&A if we have time.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing we're talking about when we speak of App 360 is really what we're monitoring, right? The 4 golden signals is something that a lot of people have heard about when talking about observability. It was kind of coined by Google in the Google SRE handbook. But essentially, we're trying to abstract that out and make it a lot easier for you to view those golden signals, right? So Logz.io traditionally was 3 tools, right? It was logs, metrics, and traces. However, App 360 in the service map and service overview is kind of our first look at creating a unified view of all of this, right? So how your services communicate across logs, metrics, and traces. Also amongst your dependencies and communication pathways. So like you can see in the service map here to the right, you can see that everything's laid out in kind of like this tree structure and how everything flows. So this allows you to correlate app performance with deployments and so forth.
I think it's important to note here when we're looking at this data and how we're correlating all of these things together is that as developers have become more distributed in their systems and have added in more complexities with things like Kubernetes and kind of with distributed systems like using these microservices, it becomes harder and harder to find what you're looking for. So what we wanted to do is provide a little bit more simpler functionality with being able to kind of see everything all in one place and be able to kind of look at those different pieces. So that's really what we're trying to achieve is more of a simplistic view of providing this sort of insight into these environments. So
Absolutely.
how do we actually do this? What are the features that we're providing for this? So once again, distributed tracing, which we've had for a while, using Jaeger. The difference is now we're doing distributed tracing, kind of connecting with Jaeger, but adding it into our UI. In the product demo, we'll be able to show this. We have something called the service list, basically providing an inventory of the particular services that you're running, what type of languages they are, so you can really get an idea of where these services or how these services are actually performing. We get an overview of this data. Like I said, we get that service list and we provide that overview where we can actually deep dive into the particular service and actually understand the infrastructure with the actual services that we're looking at. So we get those golden signals and we're looking at what's happening in the environment, but we also are able to look at the infrastructure of the data coming in and the logs. We can correlate them all in one place. And then we have the service map, which is a really cool way to be able to connect the dots between the different services. You're able to go from one service to the next and kind of understand how your whole infrastructure actually is interacting with each other, and actually getting a holistic view of your environment, as opposed to just looking at each individual service. You don't really know how they impact each other. Within the service map, you're able to do that. And then the last piece that we'll kind of highlight real quick is Easy Connect. I think it's been talked about in previous conversations, but basically the idea behind ET Connect is providing instrumentation from the Kubernetes infrastructure. So being able to, at a high level, be able to select the services that you want to actually instrument with with OpenTelemetry, but not actually having to touch code. So it's a really cool way to, at a high level, be able to provide the insight into your environments without actually going through and finding the right person to download these packages and be able to add these things in. It'll do it all on the fly.
Absolutely. Yeah. When we talk about getting telemetry data into Logz.io, the Easy Connect really makes it a lot easier when instrumenting your tracing, as well as paired with our open telemetry collector that we rolled out. It really makes collecting telemetry data from your Kubernetes environment and microservices a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah. I think when we talk about APMs, APM is sort of a generic word, a generic term, so it can mean a lot of different things as you kind of do the research. But when we think of APMs and we think of this kind of traditional way of doing things, there's a lot that goes into how you actually want to get the data from your environment. So, what data are you trying to pull from your apps? What kind of apps are you running? What kind of languages are you using? It requires a lot of knowledge of your particular infrastructure and what's happening to be able to get the data that you want out of it. And you're kind of beholden to, at least in the traditional sense, some of the more proprietary solutions to get that data out. It also, when you're getting that data out of your environment, it's kind of hard to understand what's being pulled out, what kind of sampling may be happening, you know, why did X company think of the way of how they want to do things. There's not really much control as to how you want to actually pull that data out, how you want it to look, or how you want it to like be used. And it can be hard to use this in a in sort of the modern world that we're using today. A lot of companies that I talk with today, they're using a lot more of the serverless world, a lot of Lambdas, a lot of Kubernetes, a lot of containerized environments, and it becomes very difficult to understand how you want to implement an agent. Like if you have a bunch of serverless functions, how do you add an agent to a serverless function?
Mhm.
If you have a Kubernetes infrastructure, how are you installing an agent, especially if you're doing things like Fargate, where you may not have control over the nodes and like what data you're going to get out of. It can be a little bit difficult and can really make it hard to do. And ultimately, it can become really expensive for teams. I think APMs provide a lot of functionality. They do a lot for developers and can make your life a lot easier, but that functionality can come at a premium. And I think it's no secret that when the more things that you buy and the shinier something may be, the more expensive it may be. So
Absolutely.
a lot of times developers may not actually need some of the features that some of these top brands provide. So looking at it of like, hey, can we get the core functionality for a lot lower of the cost is really some of the challenges that you can have with APMs.
Right, and I think that's one of the big benefits of Logz.io as a whole, right? When we charge based on an ingestion model, it really takes away that per feature charge that a lot of companies see in the traditional APM space or a lot of customers experience. So I think it just pairs well, right? And along with some offerings we have like cold storage and some of the archiving functionality, it really takes away a lot of the cost.
Yeah. So how does Logs.io sort of position ourselves? Um, Really, it comes down to delivering a lot of the functionality that the core functionality that an APM provides. And that core functionality really was centered around those golden signals like, hey, what's my error rate? Or what's my latency or duration of my particular services? That's what people care about. Not so much maybe all the other fancy things that may be going into there, like these fancy anomaly detection tools, and training it, or dynamic baselining. Those can be a lot of work to really get set up and do all these things. So those core functionality is a lot of what we're going to provide with Logs.io. We also do it with, we do this with simplifying the data collection that we're providing. So we actually use open telemetry to collect this data. So it is all open source. We don't have any proprietary agents within Logs.io, but we have pre-configured Logs.io telemetry collectors, which are essentially open source collectors with Logz.io wrappers around them. So it does provide that functionality that you would get with the proprietary agents maybe, but you're doing it with open source. So it's much easier to set up. We've got the correlation because we're able to tag this data. We're able to kind of put it all together. So you're able to see everything all in one place. Sean, in your eyes, I guess from like a traditional APM, like how do you think this differs?
Yeah, so I think, right, a lot of APM solutions were kind of a thing of the past. They supported a lot of legacy infrastructure. However, as we see a shift towards microservices, anyone that's in the DevOps space is probably running tons of microservices, and having the ability to quickly implement and quickly get value out of your telemetry data is a huge problem and a huge hurdle. And that's kind of what Logz.io is trying to solve, right? And with App 360, it really gives you a look into how these services communicate at a far lower price than what you're going to get from a lot of APM solutions. So I think we're talking about Logz.io, like I was mentioning, price is a huge thing and a differentiator for us, but also when it comes to functionality and really getting value out of your data quickly, it's super helpful and it's really useful. So I think that's kind of how we differ a little bit from traditional APM tools. But Spencer, if you want to add anything to that, please do.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit most of the points that I probably hit. Yeah, basically, we're just providing that core functionality, but hopefully at a much lower cost. And we really do think about the developers. We talk to customers and we try and understand what are the problems they're having. As an example, one of the big issues that we've heard from customers is that I would love to use OpenTelemetry. I'd love to instrument my applications, but I don't know how. And it seems like a lot of work. It's a lot of overhead. So we introduced Easy Connect to be able to provide that ability to get that data out of it without really doing much. There's not much effort to put in to get that instrumentation out. So it's really what we're trying to do and what we're focusing a lot of our energy on is providing that ability for developers to do what they want with the data and provide that flexibility. But
Awesome.
I think at this point, maybe we can move into the product demo piece.
Yeah, let's do it. So jumping right into Logz.io, I'm going to first demonstrate how we can use the new App 360 functionality to quickly troubleshoot an issue within my infrastructure, and then second, how we can quickly instrument our services using Easy Connect. Now, how do I know that there's an issue within my infrastructure? If I go into Slack, you can see that I got a notification just a few moments ago. This is a latency anomaly detection that I set up using Logz.io to fire when I see something anomalous happening with my services in terms of latency. So when I click on the service overview, what I'm going to be brought to is a view that looks something like this. Now I can see, since this was happening on my front end service, this is where I'm going to be brought. And we can see that there was a spike in latency, right? On top of that, the error ratios are spiking as well. So I'm receiving a lot more errors. And this most likely is because there is a lot of pod restarts. And for that, I won't be able to successfully connect, right? So I'm getting a lot of misconnections. And then on top of that, when we look in our infrastructure on the pod level, we can see that my CPU is kind of flat, but our memory is spiking drastically. So I assume that this is causing some sort of out of memory on the pod level, which is causing restarts. And then what we can see here is the error ratio spiking, and then saturation and something like latency is going to have a correlated effect. But what Logz.io is really doing here is we're correlating the metrics, the logs, and the traces all in one aggregated view. So on the front end level, we can see that the latency spiked. And then we also get our operations in terms of traces, what is causing a long time to essentially perform. So in this case, HTTP GET requests, a GET request to the product catalog. But if I take one step back here, I don't really know exactly what is wrong with my individual services. I just kind of have a holistic view that the front end, there's something going wrong in terms of latency. So if I click back into the services, and then on the right-hand corner, I click on map, we can see that I am getting a sort of a topographical view of my microservices. Now, everything is communicating, and the front end is kind of the user interface to this application. So if I click on my front end service, which I got the anomalous alert on in terms of latency, and click apply, we're going to see that this is for the error ratio, but I really want to look at latency. So when I look at latency, what I'm seeing is the front end is having some anomalous behavior that's detected, and then my recommendation service is probably what's going wrong here. So when I click on the recommendation service drill down, what we're going to see here is that latency has drastically increased. So if I look at the last 15 minutes from when I received this notification, you can see that there is a spike in latency here. In the prior day, we're seeing that it was only 10 milliseconds, but now it's up to 161 milliseconds, which is kind of alarming to me. So I want to know why this is. We can see my memory has jacked up and is pretty volatile. So I want to really know why that is. And what I can see from this deployment view, if I click on this deployment, is that this is going to jump into a GitHub repo where I use CI/CD to sort of push my commits out. And what I can see here is that there is an enable cache flag that's set from false, but now it's being set to true. So I can see that from my logs, I'm getting a lot of cache hits and I'm getting a lot of cache misses. So this is probably indicating to me that there is some sort of issue with the caching service. So what I really need to do is take this from the deployment approach and then change this back to false to see that latency drop and become not an anomaly, right? So now that I know what the issue is with my recommendation service, maybe I want to take the approach of looking at it from a different angle, right? And what I can do here with the trace view under operations is look at what's going on when reaching the get product list. So if I click into here, what we're going to see is that we still have our latency spiking and we have our deployment view. However, when I click on the duration, what I'm going to see here, if I'm doing it from a descending view, is that these requests, some are longer than others. So if I click on this trace group, I'm going to be brought to Jaeger. And what we're going to see here from a front-end perspective is the get product list is going to have a app cache hit of false. Now, what I'm going to notice when I search for my app cache hits on the recommendation service specifically is that there's going to be a drastic difference between the latency or the length of the request when we're looking at cache hits of false opposed to true, right? So if I look at app cache hit equals false, and then I find these traces on the recommendation service, we're going to see a lot of these jack up from 6.78 seconds down the list, but we're going to get some really long requests. But if I look at something like true, we're not going to see requests as long. So you'll see here that we get things in the millisecond. We get a lot of requests in the milliseconds on average. So this is going to look a lot different in terms of how long these requests take. Now, what I showed you was this App360 service overview, the service map, and then how to drill down in different views. But what if I just want to get my data into Logz.io to start off with? What you can use is something called Logz.io Easy Connect. And what Logz.io Easy Connect allows you to do is auto-instrument your services to get SPM and trace data into Logz.io quickly. So what you can do at the Logz.io Easy Connect level, once you install our Helm chart, it's very straightforward, right? All you have to do is port forward the service on your Kubernetes cluster, and then all you have to do is click edit on the services we detect and just change your log type. And then what you can do is click on deploy, and this is going to deploy and restart your service on your cluster. And then what we're going to do is add annotations to your individual pods to be able to auto-instrument using OpenTelemetry. This will start sending in traces and your SPM metrics to be able to generate the service overview and be seen in Jaeger. So if you have any questions, as always, please reach out to Logz.io support or talk to your customer success engineer like myself. All right, take care.